Hey folks, Erick Stakelbeck here. Welcome to the Watchman Newscast. Before we head into Easter weekend, I wanted to share some breaking news with you. I guess you could call it the leak heard around the world, the New York Times. Some of us would call it the New York Slimes, and for good reason. Nonetheless, they released a story on Wednesday night, April 16th, saying in essence that President Trump, quote, waved off a proposed joint U.S.-Israeli attack on Iran's nuclear facilities that Israel wanted to see take place next month, May, just a few weeks from now. A lot to unpack here. Let me preface it what the New York Times reported, what everyone's talking about right now in the Middle East space. Let me preface it by saying President Trump, I'm coming to you on Thursday afternoon, April 17th. President Trump, just a few hours ago, he was meeting with Giorgia Meloni, the Italian Prime Minister, at the White House. He was asked about this by reporters, and Trump said, quote, I didn't wave off an attack, but I'm in no rush to do it. So there you have it. And that's really not any different from what we've been reporting here on the Watchman, on the live streams for the past several weeks, even months. President Trump ultimately knows what needs to be done. The only way to really stop Iran's nuclear weapons program, folks, let's be honest, is military action. And I think most of us feel that is inevitable. And President Trump, I think, in his heart of hearts knows that as well. But he's saying, and look, remember, he came to office saying no new wars. I want peace to break out, not war. President Trump is saying, look, let's exhaust every last option. Diplomacy failed with the Biden regime vis-a-vis Iran. Trump's the deal maker. He says, maybe I can have success where everyone else failed, or maybe I can't. The bottom line is I want to at least try because I want to avoid war. I get it on one hand, but on the other hand, again, there's no way that the Iranian regime is going to agree to what needs to be agreed to, in my view at least, which is the 2003 Libya model. Remember, Muammar Gaddafi, the Libyan dictator, literally dismantled his nuclear weapons program. I mean, dismantled it, let inspectors in, and vowed never to develop nuclear weapons or try to develop nuclear weapons ever again. And it worked. I can't see the Iranian regime just dismantling its program like that. It would be humiliating for the Ayatollahs, many levels. We'll talk about it in a minute, but let's unpack this New York Times article. And again, I'm not a fan, and needless to say, and then some of the New York Times, but someone leaked this information to them. The reasoning for that leak, I mean, look, it clearly seems to be, it's probably someone in the U.S. leaking this who does not want to see a military strike against Iran's nuclear facilities. I think that's pretty obvious, number one. And number two, look, will this now cause some harm between Israeli and U.S. security officials where the Israelis might say, wow, can we trust these folks? Basically, attack plans were leaked to the New York Times of all publications. Can we trust the security establishment in the United States? Here's some of the details and what we do understand. I think this has been known for a while, but it's coming out into the open more and more. And President Trump convened a meeting of his security cabinet earlier this week. There's kind of two wings in President Trump's cabinet in the upper tier of his administration. One wing says maximum pressure on Iran. And if we need to strike them militarily, we got to do it. Their nuclear weapons program, a nuclear Iran, is an existential threat, not just to Israel, but to America. Remember, Israel and Iran's ideology and its eschatology, the Iranian regime, I should say, is the little Satan, their words, and the great Satan is the United States. And there's a reason that Iran's Ayatollahs are developing intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs, that, yes, could, God forbid, one day reach the United States. Those ICBMs aren't for Israel. They're not even for Europe. They're for America, the great Satan in the Ayatollah's view. So you've got a wing. You can count Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State in this wing, Mike Waltz, National Security Advisor, who were saying, hey, maximum pressure. We can't fool around here. Let's strike now while the iron is hot. We've been detailing here on the newscast for you over the months how vulnerable, how exposed Iran's regime is right now. to an attack on their nuclear facilities. Look, the Ring of Fire has collapsed. Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, they're really weakened now. They're licking their wounds. Assad collapsed in Syria. Israel largely destroyed Iran's air defenses back in late October. Add it all up. Iran's economy is in shambles. Add it all up. And Israel and the U.S., if they so choose, pretty much have a clear path to Iran's nuclear sites. There's about 12 of them scattered throughout the country, and Iran is vast. It's a big country. And several are fortified, buried a few hundred feet underground, so it's not easy. And that's why Israel has wanted the United States' help. For that reason, also for mid-air refueling assistance, and also for the aftermath. When Iran inevitably would launch ballistic missiles and other projectiles at Israel in response to an attack on those Iranian nuclear facilities, Israel's saying, look, America, just like the past two, last April, then this past October, the past two instances where Iran launched projectiles at us, hundreds and hundreds, we'd like American assistance in shooting them down when they're incoming. So there's a few things going on here. President Trump reportedly said, not so fast. So let's get some more of the details here from the New York Times, and again, reasoning for the leak. Some have, obviously it's someone who doesn't want to see military action, but also some have said it's a negotiating ploy. Remember, that first round of U.S.-Iranian talks was last Saturday in Oman. Round number 2 is this Saturday, April 19th, also in Oman. Negotiating ploy in that the information in this New York Times piece is pretty in-depth, and it gives an idea of just how close Israel and the U.S. were to striking Iran's nuclear sites, and that Israel's chomping at the bit to do it, and for good reason. So release this information. Khamenei and the mullahs in Iran see it, and they get scared and say, man, we better agree to a deal. So maybe there's some of that thinking in here. Nonetheless, here we go. Quoting this, just staring down my laptop and quoting directly for you. The Times of Israel picked up on this New York Times report. They're saying, quote, U.S. President Donald Trump quashed Israeli proposals for a series of joint strikes next month on Iran's nuclear facilities. I mean, May is 2 weeks away. And Trump is opting instead to try for a diplomatic solution to the problem of Tehran's nuclear program, the New York Times reported. Trump's dismissal earlier this month of Jerusalem's plans, which Israeli officials had discussed with their U.S. counterparts and were ready to carry out in May if they could secure U.S. support and participation, resulted from internal divisions in the Trump administration, the report said. I mentioned that one wing where you got a Marco Rubio, a Mike Waltz saying, we got to do what we got to do, even if it's military action. And you have another wing, J.D. Vance, the vice president, Tulsi Gabbard, director of national intelligence, and some others perhaps, who say, look, diplomacy, we can resolve this. Let's get a deal. Iran is so weak, they'll agree to a deal. And I see that Iran is certainly weak. I could see where you may conclude that, but I just can't see that Iran will agree to the kind of deal that's necessary here to really negate their nuclear ambitions. Sources briefed on the proposed attack said it aimed to set back Iran's ability to break out to a bomb by at least a year. But months of debate among Trump's aides on the issue resulted in a general consensus against military action as Tehran showed signs of being open to talks. Again, according to the New York Times. And President Trump, I guess when Bibi was here in the U.S. last week, President Trump, I believe that was April 7th, President Trump told him ixnay on the strike and said, no, we're not going to do it right now. And the U.S., of course, Israel would want the U.S. to be involved here in assisting in that strike. The reasons I laid out a minute ago, it would include airstrikes. I mean, a lot of details here. Operational. I'm not reporting anything, by the way. Don't say, why are you giving away attack plans? This is all out there in the New York Times. Everyone has seen it now. I'm just telling you what's in it. Not only airstrikes, but perhaps commando raids were considered on Iran's nuclear sites. Something similar to what Israel pulled off in Syria back in September at some sites there. Not nuclear sites, but some sensitive sites there. And I think the Israeli government was surprised by this, and that's the gist of this article too, kind of a rude awakening. And, listen, I think Israel thought they'd have President Trump's support right away, and not that they won't have it and they don't have it, but President Trump right now is literally reading the room and saying, you know what, my cabinet's completely divided here. Let's give the diplomatic option a chance. And he's been very clear. If that fails and Iran insists on a bomb, then we're going to strike. So I think this may just be delaying the inevitable. And President Trump gets it. He understands the threat. He knows that his legacy, at least part of it, is riding on preventing Iran from getting the bomb. So we're keeping a very close eye on this. And look, this may be a case of, hey, Israel loves President Trump. There's a great relationship there, of course, but Israel may have to act alone. President Trump's the most pro-Israel president in American history, and he's the toughest president on Iran ever. Look back at his first term, eliminating Soleimani, pulling out of the disastrous first incarnation of the Iran deal. Why would he agree to a bad one now if he pulled out of a bad one the first time? I don't see that happening. Taking out Soleimani, as I said, designating the Revolutionary Guards Corps as a terrorist organization, moving the embassy to Jerusalem, the U.S. Embassy, recognizing Israeli sovereignty over the Golan. The list goes on. President Trump deserves the benefit of the doubt on this, but I'll close in saying time is short. Time is running very short. It's in a unique window to eliminate an existential threat, Iran's nuclear program, and I think there's going to be a lot of regret if we're sitting here a year from now and that program is still alive. And Iran has bolstered its air defenses. It's building its proxies back up, rebuilding the Ring of Fire. I don't think Israel is going to let that happen. And Israel may be faced with a very uncomfortable position of doing something that is in opposition to the Trump administration's wishes. And usually they're in sync. Usually President Trump, Bibi are very much in sync. But in this case, Israel's saying we're going to have to do it regardless of who's in the Oval Office for our existence. Look, Bibi is 75 years old. He's the longest serving Israeli prime minister. He believes this, dealing with Iran's nuclear program, is the real reason he's been in office. And I don't think he leaves office without dealing with it. So fasten your seatbelts. Happy Passover to all my Israeli friends. Talk about shifting gears. Chag Sameach, as they say in Israel. Happy Easter, of course, to everyone. And we'll see what happens tomorrow, Saturday. If something breaks, we'll be with you. No doubt. Make sure to subscribe. Keep this all in prayer. God is sovereign. Pray for wisdom and discernment for the leaders of Israel and the United States. And until next time, God bless you. And remember, never hold your peace. Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the Watchman Newscast. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss an upload, and tap the bell icon so you're notified every time a new video is posted. And don't forget to share your thoughts, insights, and comments below. Thanks for watching. We'll see you back here tomorrow.